Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Tonight, I bring you a bombshell show on the most radical bishop in the episcopate, Heiner Wilmer. This bishop, for being the most radical, most heretical bishop in the entire Roman Catholic Church, was nearly rewarded by Pope Francis with the highest episcopal position imaginable, the doctrinal chief. You might call it the DDF. I still call it the CDF prefect. The point is he was rewarded. Tonight, we want to talk about why he was rewarded. Bishop Strickland, yesterday, I spoke of as being demoted as a kind of punitive measure. Why was he demoted? Because he loves the Eucharist and the deposit of faith. That's why he was demoted. That's the only thing we can figure it. Joining me to talk about this again is my friend from yesterday, Stephen Jonathan Rummelsburg from the City of Truth. What's up, Steve?
What's up, Tim? Thanks for having me again. 2 days in a row.
Yes, today is a conceptual dovetail with yesterday. Yesterday, we were defending Bishop Strickland. That's always will continue. Bishop Strickland, anything we can do to help you. But now we're observing, Steve, the inverse side of the coin. If under the Francis pontificate, the good is taken for bad and bad is taken for good, dark for light, light for dark, all that stuff. Well, then let's see if that then for the principle to hold true, if the best bishop in the church, who I've always called Strickland the last 5 years, is bad, then the worst bishop in the church must be good. And does this ring true? If my logic rings true, it must. And yes, we're going to look at early 2023, this year, when Pope Francis attempted to reward the leader of the German synodal way, we have lots to talk about tonight, with the highest episcopal office, basically the vice president of the church, if you will, the doctrinal chief, the DDF. First, though, couple plugs. Number one, Steve, will you tell us in 10 seconds about City of Truth? It's a great new Catholic podcast. I want all of you parish orphans and retrogrades to go there. Steve, give us an 8-second clip of what you offer in fine.
Yeah, City of Truth is the culmination of over 3 decades of experience in the public schools, K through 12, where I discovered not just that it's morally bankrupt, but that it's intellectually bankrupt. And what I'm doing is trying to recover an authentic education so that parents can reacquire a true education to educate their children. So all I talk about is education, culture, and the faith.
From a Catholic perspective.
From a Catholic perspective, in the great Western tradition, yes.
So it's on YouTube, right? Everyone
yes.
Go to City of Truth, Stephen Jonathan Rummelsburg. He's an education guru in the church. Steve and I have been friends for well over 10 years.
A long time.
Yeah, go there and subscribe to the channel. Just the way I'm always telling you, and I'll do it right now. Subscribe to this channel. Under 50% of my usual viewers are subscribed. So like, subscribe, click the notification to my channel. And while you're at it, open up another window and go do so to City of Truth. Also, you've got a little more time before the 2024 election. Get out of your blue state, get to a red state, go to realestateforlife.org and get from the blue to the red. This includes you, Steve. Get out of your blue state, get to a red state, because that's your true republic. I went from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red, and it affected my day-to-day drastically, my actual familial happiness. www.realestateforlife.org. Finally, please support this channel on Locals and on Subscribestar, because I got kicked off of Patreon for teaching Catholic sexual morality properly. You're not allowed to do that in the public square anymore. Now, that's the end of the plugs. This brings us to Bishop Heiner Wilmer, or Wilmer, the way the Germans say it. I'm going to call him Wilmer, who says, probably alongside Patreon, that the Roman Catholic sexual morality needs to change. Now, he said it for a long time. He said it loudly. He's relatively young for the episcopate. He's 61. And Steve, we have 5 points today. We're going to go through this in 5 points. It's going to culminate with the St. Gallen Mafia. That'll be the last thing we talk about tonight. But first, I want to just draw the conceptual connection between what we were talking about yesterday, the one of the few good bishops, I think the best bishop, got debishoped by Pope Francis last week for being good. Then we're going to talk about why was Wilmer nearly elevated, but not fully. Then we're going to talk about, thirdly, what is the DDF and why does it matter to Francis specifically? Number 4, we're going to enumerate Heiner Wilmer's positions, which are all nakedly, no pun intended, heretical, and that which got him nearly the second highest position in the church, second only to Pope. And then number 5, we're going to talk about the Sankt Gallen Mafia, who represent basically the backing behind the German Synodal Way, Heiner Wilmer. They're a generation above this younger man who's 61. You're still younger than him, Steve.
I'm still quite a bit younger than him, in spite of appearances.
No, I'm just kidding you. Okay, but first off, what did you think yesterday when we were going through and my characterization of, so we're not going to talk about Strickland much today, aside from he's the hero. He's the foil for a Wilmer type of bishop. As in the terms of Our Lady of Akita, she said, bishop will be set against bishop, cardinal against cardinal, and the good bishops who love my son will be scorned by their confreres. What would you think of applying that to the facts, to the law to the facts?
It's a perfect fit. It's an absolutely perfect puzzle piece fit where they excoriate the faithful and elevate the unfaithful. It's so stark now. It's something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. And it's so utterly stark. And anybody who truly knows Bishop Strickland understands that they had to invent reasons to remove him, whereas they have to ignore all the things that they're elevating these guys for. I mean, Wilmer says the abuse of power is in the DNA of the church, and we'll go over that later, but what a phrase. What an anarchical, Marxist, material reductionist, heretical phrase that is, as opposed to the fidelity of Bishop Strickland. So it's a perfect inversion according to Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good.
Yes. So yesterday we also discussed, Steve, how Isaiah 5 has to be in place if it's true that, as you and I assert and many others, Bishop Strickland got demoted not in spite of the fact that he's good, but because he's good. That has to represent a diametrical inversion, a turning on the head. We're going to return to that phrase later. A turning on the head of good and evil in the church by its vicar of Christ, Pope Francis, right? You can't, it would be one thing if he got removed as arguably the holiest bishop in the church because he was like incompetent and he couldn't do basic math or keep the books or something. Like maybe you think of the Cour d'Ars like this way, could barely pass the boards to become a priest. But St. John Vianney. But this isn't the case. Bishop Strickland things were all fine. We went through yesterday and we showed it's basically not in spite of the fact that he's good, he was demoted, but because of the fact that he's good. Now, if that's
can
true,
I add something to that, Tim?
Yeah.
I want to add one thing to that. And it's really interesting to notice that in this digging through the haystack to try to find something against Bishop Strickland, they literally found nothing. But in the process of turning his life over in his diocese and going through the process of removing him, it puts an amazing amount of stress on the good bishop. And any little misstep he makes after that, that's the thing they pounce on.
Yes.
And this is very typical of the mob.
Always. James Madison said, even if every citizen were a Socrates, every jury would still be a mob. And Mark Twain would always talk about, 2 or more in a room becomes a mob so quickly, particularly 3 or more where they can gang up on someone. I think it might have been 3 or more. Yeah. So I said, this is the last time I'm going to mention the good Bishop Strickland for this show anyway. I'm sure we'll come back to him soon. He was removed for his love of the fixedness of the deposit of faith, the one thing under the sun that doesn't really change, the one thing that human fingerprints are on constantly, that doesn't change. He loves the fixedness of the deposit of faith, and this is the closest thing he was given as justification for why me? Why'd you take me out? because you love the deposit of faith too much. And the Eucharist. I always heard that at USCCB meetings, Steve, he'd eat lunch alone in a cafeteria with all the fat kids at fat camp. He's the fit kid among all the fat kids, and so they like a bunch of queens scorned him. Yeah. Which is just what they do. Yeah. And he'd spend his lunches in front of Eucharistic adoration. I it's not a stretch to believe that's true. So say he was removed for his love of the deposit of faith and the Eucharist. Now, removed by who? Pope Francis. Right. All, capo tutti capi is Pope Francis. Right. That would mean that when we do this show today on Heiner Wilmer, who 2 different times at the beginning, within a year of now, earlier, was attempted to be elevated to DDF chief, doctrinal chief, it would stand to reason that it would be for his loathing of the deposit of faith and the Eucharist. Loathing. And a lot of people would say that's, I mean, it sounds kind of exaggerative, right? No cap, though. No cap. What do you say?
I 100% agree. Loathing, deep-seated loathing, so much so that he wants to radically transform the church, which you do so by emasculating men and inviting them into unnatural things. But I can't get over that, saying the abuse of power is in the DNA of the church. I can't get over that barbaric. It's just unbelievable. It's so Marxist. And contrary to the good bishop, who literally still sits on the rock of Peter and this tradition. So in spite of appearances, I still think Bishop's in good shape. And even though Wilmer's being elevated, this is not going to go well.
No, not for him soteriologically. Now, but if people think, by the way, that I'm exaggerating, listen to what Wilmer said. I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, it was before Francis attempted to elevate him. I would say it's probably part of the reason he tried to elevate him. Listen to what he said about the Eucharist in an interview. He said, "It's overrated. It's already been overrated," he said. Catholics act, or most Catholics act, quote, as if there is nothing else besides the Eucharist. It's overrated, this Eucharist. Can you believe that the doctrinal chief said that? Are we in clown world?
It's unbelievable. Jesus, the one through whom all things were made, is overrated. It just seems impossible to say.
Well, now let's get into it. The second section of tonight. Why was he nearly elevated? Now, there's a couple different ways we could italicize section number 2. Why was he nearly elevated? We could say, why was he nearly elevated? Like a Seinfeld episode. Or why was he nearly elevated? Let's do both. So I will say, to talk about why he was nearly elevated, simpliciter, we have to talk about his positions, which we'll do momentito. But I want to talk about, why do we say nearly? Here's what happened. Last year, right before Benedict died. When did he die? The 30th of December? Do you remember?
I don't recall. Right.
I think it was December the 30th.
Okay.
It was December 30th, 29th, 31st. Someone in comments, if you know, shout it at us. It was something like that. Well, Cardinal Ladaria Ferrer, who had been the CDF, we're going to talk about more Ladaria Ferrer at the end of tonight's talk. He had grown old with Francis. The long and the short of it is, he was defending the deposit of faith too much. He was getting in the way of the revolutionary change that's coming, that Francis is bringing. And Francis knew he needed the most radical bishop in the church. So 2 different times he put up Heiner Wilmer, and we do not have much of the story. But when this Catholic World Report article was written, that I'm sourcing from 3 articles mainly at the time, and I was watching this very closely at the end of last year. The article came out mid-December, and it said the expected date of Wilmer's elevation to doctrinal chief would be December the 18th, before Christmas, before Benedict had even died. We knew he was going to die any day. Right. That didn't happen. And then Benedict died, and it's we're not sure if the the intervention of the cardinals, Steve, happened before that first one. I think what might have happened is a theory. Francis saw how sick Benedict was, and he was like, that's going to steal the news. In one way, that would be good because I could sneak this radical into office. But in another way, it would be bad because we want to signal, okay, there is a new DDF in town. There's a new sheriff in town. Mm-hmm. At any rate, let's wait. So pushed it back 3 weeks. In early January, the talks began again. I was waiting. The 18th, 19th, 20th of December is when we're going to be DDF. In a way, it would be good because then there would be no more plausible deniability for Francis, though he always seems to have plausible deniability in the eyes of folks like
Lofton,
Pope's energy. But early January, then, it was said to be another certainty, and it kept not happening that second week of January. And the sources, Misa Latina, said there had been an intervention of cardinals saying, Francis, don't do this. Now, those interventions by holy men, holy scholars, bishops, cardinals, dubia, have been thrown at Francis since 2015. How many dubia have been thrown at him? And he doesn't listen. So do you have any guesses, Steve, as to why you think Francis might have actually pumped the brake and eventually said, no, we can't do Wilmer. We're going to do the next most radical cardinal in the church, Tucho Fernandez. Do you have any guesses?
I have a guess. I can't claim to know, but that incrementalism of the radical left, he just barely read the writing on the walls. I had heard that Cardinal Pell interjected before he died. I don't know if that's true either, but I believe he intervened. And I think it was just a prudent, a sort of materially prudent incrementalism that that the Pope, he's smart. He's a smart guy. He reads it politically very well. That's what I guess it was, and I don't know. Do you know what it was?
I have a very good guess. I asked Diane Montaigne if she had any other info on this yesterday, and she got back to me. She's like, "Why are you looking into this?" I said, "Because of the Strickland stuff. We need to show both sides of the coin." She said, "Oh, yeah, let me check." She hasn't gone back to me. She said, check with Mesa Latina. Here's the thing. Pell was one of the guys right before he died. Remember, he died and Benedict died within 2 weeks. Or maybe it was within a month, but that was very strange, right? I don't know.
Yes.
Well, Pell objects the way Pell he's been with the dubia cardinals on so many of their implorings of Pope Francis not to do the insane material heresy that's been thrown left and right at the church, and he's always ignored. So why would he be indulged here? Here's the recent presidential elect of Pope Francis's own Argentina, Javier Milei, and he spoke with Tucker. Was it just earlier today or yesterday? And
I heard it a month ago or so. I didn't hear it today. Did he speak today?
Everyone was sending it to me today. Okay.
Okay. So
this must have been before he was presidential elect. Listen to what he says. He's big time Zionist guy. So I don't agree with him on everything, but listen to what he says about Pope Francis. I'm gonna have to do a little transliteration here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
Es un asesinato. So I would think you're a Catholic. You said you're just defending really the Catholic life principle. The current Pope is from Argentina. I would think he would support you. He has instead criticized you, and you've called him a communist. Why the disconnect?
Bueno, primero porque el Papa juega políticamente.
Okay, so the first thing he says is, well, that's because the Pope plays politics.
Yes. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so I want to apply what he's saying because he's an Argentine. He knows it's true. The Pope was a big enthusiast of Juan Perón, who is a Machiavellian type Argentine figure who played with not a strong left figure the way some of the Pope's other political enthusiasms are strongly left. He's kind of played the left and the right, which Francis does do, but he's a man of the left.
Yes.
But listen to who else he says he follows. He's a big time politician. This is why I'm going to play Cardinal.
He calls him a communist. Yeah.
Yep. Here it is.
Es decir, es un papa donde tiene fuerte injerencia política.
He has a strong political influence.
Strong interest. Yeah. Right.
Is it interest or influence? Yeah.
I heard interest, but I don't know if I'm not there.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Strong political interest.
Yeah.
That means he's strongly interested in politics, and he gets involved in world politics more than any pope ever has by far. I mean, he's always there with the WEF, Jeffrey Sachs, Ban Ki-moon. They hang out there. He feels more. He doesn't feel like a religious man. He feels like a
man of the world. Yeah.
Ha demostrado además una gran afinidad con dictadores como Castro o como con Maduro.
And he's shown great affinity for dictators like Castro.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your Spanish is good, Tim.
It's not that bad anymore. I have some help here, but from the mine's not as good as yours. I hear Italian better than Spanish, but no, I have some help here.
Es decir, está del lado de dictaduras sangrientas.
He's on the side of these bloody dictatorships, he says, and then Tucker's like, whoa, hold the phone, bro.
Raúl Castro's a murderer.
Sí, y Fidel Castro también era otro asesino.
But the Pope,
what did he say?
Yes. An affinity for the assassins. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, and so is Fidel, and Pope Francis loves Fidel. I mean, these are
the Pope has an affinity for this.
Yeah. But Parish Orphans and Retrogrades, you guys probably know, but I've been interacting with a lot of new Catholics on Twitter that didn't even know what a Mors Laetitia was. They're like, well, that's not going to happen. Communion for divorce until you're married. I'm like, bro, this is 7 years old. You're embarrassing right now. This is well known. He loves the Castros. He loves Maduro. He loves Perón. All right.
He loves the assassins.
Loves the assassins.
Believe the Pope has an affinity for Raúl Castro?
Sí, exacto.
Of course.
Sí, tiene afinidad por los comunistas asesinos.
What did he say? He has
the communist assassins. He has an affinity for these guys, these strongmen that murder people.
You know, something was silencing Benedict, right? There has to be force on the other side somehow. Benedict sat there for 9 years. All right, here goes.
De hecho, no los condena. Es decir, es bastante condescendiente con ellos.
In fact, he won't condemn them. He's very lenient to them or something, right?
Yes.
Y es también condescendiente con la dictadura venezolana.
What did he say there?
I missed that one.
He's lenient also towards Venezuela or
dictator
of Venezuela.
Yes.
Es decir, él es condescendiente con todos los de izquierdas, aun cuando sean verdaderos criminales.
He's lenient. Pope Francis, is
true criminals. Yeah,
toward the entire left, even the ones that are true criminals, which is pretty much all of them. But the entire left, he loves.
Yeah.
Lo cual eso es un problema.
That's a
Pero
problem.
además es alguien que considera que la justicia social, un
social justice warrior,
de su visión, y es
social justice. Social justice is a central tenet of his vision.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Yes.
Es muy complicado porque la justicia social, ¿qué es?
He says that's difficult because let's talk about what
social justice really is. He didn't say it there, but what is it?
What is it really? And then
what is social justice? He explains it, right?
Yeah, he explains it. He's like, look, it's stealing. It's stealing, and this violates
it's socialism.
It's socialism. So, and this I agree with, but that's gets beside the point here. I wanted to show that Heiner Wilmer was nearly elevated, but not elevated. We'll talk about why but why was he nearly elevated, but not elevated?
Right.
Because Francis is so strongly politically interested. He has to do two things at once, Steve. There are three things I want to say here, but first I want to get your comment. The Catholic deposit of faith, the depositum fidei, is the only human artifact under the sun that doesn't change and can't change because it's not fully human. It's half human, half divine, right? I mean, it's written by human pens, by human stroke, witness my hand and seal kind of thing. But it's really the author is God. It's you know, deposit of faith, meaning scriptures like that, traditions like that. There's nothing else that doesn't change. We Americans, and I've been guilty of this at times too, but I do have pride in the American Constitution as a constitutional scholar. We talk as if it can't change. They tried to frame it where it can't change, as if there's an American deposit of faith. That's been reversed, but they tried a really real effort at not letting it change the Constitution. There's only one thing. It's the deposit of faith. We talked about the eminently good Bishop Strickland as being demoted because he said the deposit of faith is that which cannot change.
Right.
Well, Pope Francis, I just want to get your take. He is preeminently political, and he's his whole job. I'm going to present it here today. Wilmer really proves it. Wilmer says it. Wilmer also proves it without saying it. His whole job is to try to change the most unchangeable human artifact of all human written things. And you have to be aggressive to do that. You can't go too slow, but you can't go too fast. And I'm saying point number one, Heiner Wilmer was too obvious. I want to add a couple other points, but can you talk about the proper speed of change for being appropriately aggressive for the most ambitious, for changing the most unchangeable thing under the sun?
That's right. And you know what? There's a perfect analogy behind the whole TRANS movement, where you try to make a buck of dough. It's so impossible. And they've had to move a pace on that too. That's the material version of what we're seeing with the attack on the deposit of faith. The deposit of faith is a transcendental, universal, eternal, spiritual thing manifest in the artifacts that man has made to flesh that out. So it's a composite. It's a unity. In the same way, a male is a male and a female is a female. And it's a similar kind of pace that they're trying to invert that order, that they are the deposit of faith in the church. So I think it's the counterpart to the trans movement.
Yeah.
If I could say that.
Well, yeah, we'll call it Transformers.
The Transformers, yes.
And Wilmer's a big fan of playing with Transformers and trying to make Transformers the law of the land. Obviously, he's going to be with them. He says the communion's overrated and Catholics are too obsessed with it, and it's like faith affirming care. Right.
Faith affirming care.
Right.
Believe in yourself.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's the same subjectivism and relativism you brought up yesterday.
But how does you're the one that brought up incrementalism, which is good because I wanted to talk about it. I just forgot to prompt it myself. How does incrementalism require the perfect cooking temp, the perfect speed of change when you're inside the church? It's not America. Changing the Constitution turned out to be surprisingly easy. It took them about 100 years to do it. But the deposit of faith's been around for 1965 years, let's say that, before they started cooking with it. And that it had a lot more staying power than the American Constitution.
That's right.
What's the importance of incrementalism, speed of change, when you're trying to change something that everyone knows can't be changed, Steve?
Yeah, it's vitally important to take your time. Just like McCarrick said yesterday, that was so gross. I reshared your post because it's just so chilling to have him say, look, in 5 years, he'll radically change the church. I mean, like you said, we're 10 years in. That incrementalism is the brakes being pumped on even McCarrick's vision of how that was going to go down. You know, they really believe Bergoglio could do this in 5 years. And I'm quoting the word Bergoglio from him, not because I'm a sedevacantist. It's really true that they have to pump the brakes on it. They have to yield it. And I do think there's a much bigger movement in the church than there is in society. I think it's easier and quicker to destroy society, but that was the precursor to destroying the church anyway. The attack on the family, the attack on the female, the attack on the male had to be so.
Listen to this, since my amigo Steve here brought it up. I'll just play it for all y'all. late 2013 at Villanova University. I have video on this too, but it's easier to just play it like this. And the people listening by audio podcast can't see it anyway. Here is Cardinal Uncle Ted Theo McCarrick talking about his good buddy Bergoglio and how he and a mysterious, influential Italian gentleman, my friend Stephen O'Reilly, is pretty sure he knows which Italian gentleman this is, how they cooked up a pontificate of Pope Francis. Remember, Cardinal McCarrick was a kind of emeritus member of the St. Gallen Mafia we're going to talk about in section 5 tonight. Listen to the villain of the church, universally accepted villain of the church, Theo McCarrick.
Bergoglio was a friend of mine because the community, I live in a religious community in Washington, and it's a community that was founded in Argentina. So, they were always talking about Bergoglio, the Archbishop in Argentina, about maybe just before we went into the general conversations when everybody can talk. Very interesting and influential Italian gentleman came to ask if he'd come to see me. So I said, sure. And he came to see me at the seminary, the American college where I was staying. We sat down. This is a very brilliant man, very influential man in Rome. And we talked about a number of things. He had a favor to ask me for back here in the United States.
What do you think that favor was? This is just a pause. What do you think that favor was?
I couldn't even guess. What do you think?
Don't drop the soap is what I'm thinking. But
then he said, what about Bergoglio? And I was surprised. That's the question. I said, what about him? He said, does he have a chance? I said, I don't think so, because no one's mentioned his name. He hasn't been into his mind. I don't think it's on anybody's mind to vote for him. He said he could do it, He said he could do it, I said, what could he do? He said he could reform the church. He gave him 5 years. He could put us back on target. And he's 76. They said, yeah, 5 years. If he had 5 years, the Lord working through Bergoglio in 5 years could make the church over again. Make the church over again.
Now,
so plain. It's so stark.
It's not very people say, oh, you're seeing things that aren't there. This is, if you don't know who this is, you probably don't listen to this show, and I don't know, whatever. But I want to close out section 2 here. Why was Heiner Wilmer nearly elevated? I think we played this yesterday too with Ted McCarrick, because one, it would have been too obvious. That's my point number 1. Steve, you intoned very nicely that this is a function of incrementalism, can't be too fast. And Heiner Wilmer, being the DDF prefect, would have been too fast. But you also can't go too slow.
Right.
That's why I played Uncle Ted McCarrick 6 months after they had their guy in office. McCarrick was called by some the most powerful man in America, not prelate. He thought that he'd won, and he thought, look, watch what happens by 2018.
Yeah.
What throughout, you can't go too slow either. And Francis he's taken twice as many years now, 10 years of his pontificate, and they're still accomplishing goals 2 and 3 of the St. Gallen agenda. I'll read that when we get to that section. That's our section tonight. Let me not forget to do that.
Don't forget that. And don't you think it's worse watching the video with it? So go to Tim's Twitter and watch McCarrick say those things. It's an image you just can't get out of your mind. So maybe don't go watch it. It's horrendous.
And you hear the crackling sounds in his disgusting mouth. Yeah, you watch him and you think, look, we're going to accomplish everything the St. Gallen Mafia wanted by 2018. It was late. That was October of 2013. Francis had been in the chair for 6 months. And everyone was falling all over themselves worshiping Francis back then. Yeah. Besides me. I think we knew each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We known each other.
We had just met. Yeah.
And I couldn't stand him, right? I knew from the outset. He brought Gottfried Daniel's out there. He's going to St. Gallen Mafia member. Yeah. He brought him out there on the loggia. I didn't know who he was then, but this is nothing but bad. So you can't go too slow. And I think what happened was in the years 2014 and 2015, Francis and McCarrick and all of the other perverts that support him in the cardinalate, all of his best friends in the St. Gallen Mafia, they had underestimated the pushback they would get from the American right wing in the church, particularly during the 2014 and 2015 family synods, when they were tasked with when Francis was tasked with by his bosses, the St. Gallen Mafia in the Cardinalate, with giving communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. So we'll get to the Mafia in a second. We'll remember Cardinal Walter Brammuller told us because he's in the German Cardinalate. He's the one conservative. Right. He's the fit kid at Fant Camp, like good Bishop, Strickland in the USCCB. There's maybe a couple others, but Cardinal Brammuller said, here's the order they're going to go. This was number one. He knew from all the Germans this would be item number one. Mm-hmm. And it took longer because at those 2014 and 2015 synods, you had the good Africans. Thank you, Cardinal Sarah and others. You had the good Asians who really created havoc. And then the American news media, largely now defunct Steve Skojec. He did great work. He's no longer Catholic, but he was too disillusioned. But that's on Pope Francis, right? He covered in 1 Peter 5 every day what was going on. And Francis didn't predict that. So he actually got behind. He got behind the ball, even though they thought that they were going to catch up. Remember, they did this before. The liberals in the 70s. They thought they were going to get contraception, and they were thrown off in 1968. They thought they were going to get
handled it. Yep.
Yeah.
Let me make one point, Tim. Think about this. I don't think evil knows the too slow. It's so arrogant. So it's an incredible amount of discipline to tamper down the momentum of the evil, because evil by nature is arrogant and blind. It can't see. Even McCarrick's evil outran him. Right? If he went at the right pace, he wouldn't have been so outed. So evil can't stay hidden forever, and its impulse is to burst through with tremendous arrogance with Satan's "I will not serve." Isn't that right? So incrementalism, going too slow is tough for evil. They tend to go too fast.
But okay, so back in 1996, we'll get to this timeline later, but in 1996, the leader of the St. Gallen Mafia said, there's one guy that can do the job. And I've always thought this meant there's one guy that's this far left, that hates the church this much, that is willing to do what we think needs to be done to put us back on target. Cardinal Martini always used that term too, alongside
back on target.
And that one man that's capable of such patience, I'm quoting Giulia Meloni, patience is the mark of this man, Bergoglio.
Wow.
He's the only one that's paid. He said that in 1996, as he was getting Parkinson's he was diagnosed at almost the same time as his who he thought was his nemesis, John Paul II. Cardinal Martini hated him. They both got Parkinson's, and he was originally putting himself up. I'm going to be the next Pope. Time magazine even ran a magazine cover on him. The anti-Pope, ANTE, the Pope before the Pope. And everyone thought Martini was going to be it, but he got Parkinson's. And so he passed the St. Gallen Mafia on to Achille Silvestrine. And we'll go through some of the other veterans of the St. Gallen Mafia, some of the other...
when we get to that part, Tim, are you going to give us the origin and what the St. Gallen Mafia is?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that in order. I mean, I've done many shows on it.
Okay, so everyone here knows.
I realize this is a podcast, so people don't all listen to your podcast the way they're
right.
You can't assume that everyone's listening to everything like it's required reading in a semester college course. Yeah, it's another funny thing.
That's right.
Loft Dog does. He'll be like, I did a show on this 13 months and 6 days ago. I'm surprised you haven't listened to it.
You should have memorized the whole thing. I'm giving you a pop quiz. Yeah. The guy's running a public classroom, a social science experiment, on his podcast, and then excoriates anyone who doesn't keep up.
Right. I already talked about it. It's weird. Yeah. So a lot of people are listening for the first time on any given night. So the point is, you can't go too slow. You can't go too fast. Francis is great at patience. Giulia Meloni, really, I keep looking for my St. Gallen Mafia book. I just spotted it on the shelf. Next time you talk, I'm going to pop up and get it. Okay. Patience is the thing that they wanted him for. He's really aggressive. He knows how to be aggressive, but also patient. He got it from Juan Perón. He's a huge admirer, Bergoglio, Francis, of Juan Perón. And that's why they said, we need this guy, not actually Martini, who in the late 90s had Parkinson's. They're the enemies of the church trying to bring it down from within. That's the short answer. But the third thing I wanted to say here, and then we'll move on to the actual next section, the third section, is Tucho Fernandez was probably the second most radical bishop in the church. He's also the ghost author of Amoris Laetitia and some of Francis's other documents. He's also written a book called Heal Me With Your Mouth about making out. You guys think this is strange. I mean, so do I. But you have to understand.
Lofton doesn't think it's that strange.
Lofton doesn't think that's strange. What did Lofton say about it?
He has a whole video on it, or I think I saw him talking about it. He was just kind of rationalizing and justifying it. Typical sophistry on why it wasn't a bad thing, how he's just getting attacked for it because he's doing Solomon's Song of Songs in a modern rendition. Just an apologist for evil.
An apologist for evil. You can't really call it anything else. But I attended the Greg, where they ran the Shadow Council at nights in, the first Jesuit university in the world, right there in Rome, right, 80-second walk from the Trevi Fountain. And this is where they hatched at night with only the liberals at Vatican II invited. Come by the Greg, we'll do what they call Shadow Council, and they'd plan out how to sort of cheat the rules the next day, how they're going to abuse Ottaviani. Remember, they turned off the mic on him and pissed on his doorstep. I heard Yves Congar pissed on his doorstep every night of the first year of the council. They really abused him, and they're really horrible catty Skittles type men running the council. So attending the Greg, I went with many South American priests in my philosophy classes, and they all said, oh yeah, man, I remember I was talking to a Peruvian priest, and he was like, I mean, all priests have girlfriends or a boyfriend, a girlfriend or a boyfriend. That's the South American church. You're out of touch. And it's like you're from the Middle Ages if you think otherwise. So when they all agree. They're like, yeah, we all have, you don't follow the rule. These rules are meant to be broken. That's what they'd always tell me. So that's how now the number 2 in the church has a publishing title to his name, Heal Me With Your Mouth. And you're like, isn't this about making out? Yeah, but he's a priest. Isn't this like the blind leading the blind? No. Only if you're, some old, they say only if you're an Anglo Catholic, usually a North Americano. You guys take Catholicism seriously, or maybe some French do, some Filipino, some Africans, but no one else really takes that shit seriously. So that's why, they're all bad guys. And also, I want to get on to section 3 now. Heiner Wilmer, his teachers, Cardinal Casper, a lot of the guys that are in the German pontificate, none of them believe Jesus really resurrected. Now, these are all the, really, almost none of the Germans believe in the real resurrection of Jesus or any of the other miracles. They'll all say the miracle was the miracle of sharing. Jesus only, he critically resurrected. Jordan Peterson might believe that. He didn't actually resurrect. So these guys are not, in fact, Catholic. And okay, so the next question, the next section is, why does specifically the CDF matter? And here's why it matters to Francis's program of weaponized ambiguity and incrementalism. Why do you need a radical CDF? It's kind of obvious, but a lot of people might miss it. It's because in 2014 and then I want you to react to this, Steve. In 2014 and 2015, at the 2 family synods, the extraordinary one in October of 2014, and then the ordinary one in October of 2015, they were like, Cardinal Casper had written this plan to give sexually active adulterers who are currently having sex with someone besides their spouse, communion. And the Pope-splainers then, more understandably than now, were like, this is never going to happen, bro. They would tell me that, and Americans, we were all arguing about it. The Americans who care, I guess the South Americans and the Europeans don't really care. But so what we learned, Monsignor Charles Pope coined this phrase. Francis if you study him in Argentina when he was a bishop, he uses Juan Prone's weaponized ambiguity. So Charles Pope said, don't expect out of the eventual exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, which came out in April of 2016, don't expect him to say the phrase communion for divorced and civilly remarried. He's not going to say that.
Right.
He's going to do something slippery. Remember, he put it in a footnote. At Querida Amazonia, the exhortation after the 2019 synod, he put all the slippery stuff not into a footnote, but an attachment to the doc. And even then, in the footnote, he won't say communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. He's going to say exactly what he said in those footnotes. Communion's not a prize for the perfect. You know, we have to let them come back. He used all this codified language. They do need to get the sacraments, though, adulterers.
Yeah.
And so he needs a doctrinal chief that will take Francis's document and codify it into the AAS and codify it into Response from Dubia, the two big parts that the CDF prefect runs. Right? Help him put it into the Acta Apostolica Sedis, the living magisterium, and responses to Dubia, and there the DDF has to be the one that really is like, yeah, so now you can go have sex with your girlfriend, you know, divorced remarrieds. That's what they did at the start of this synod a month and a half ago. Remember, on September the 30th, they answered a bunch of dubia, and they're like, by the way, from 7 years ago, from the family synods, yes, there is no more adultery, basically. Adulterers who are remarried, you do not have to stop having sex. They answered that. They answered a bunch of other stuff. They also said that the church can now bless SS unions. So the point is, it does matter. The CDF matters because under Francis's weaponized ambiguity, he can't use precise phrases. Communion for divorced or married, woman deacon. It's going to be the same way now. I told everyone a month ago, he's not going to say woman deacon. He's going to say we're extending this new kind of diaconate. And it's kind of in between Susanna and Joanna from Acts, which are not ordained deacons, and between ordained deacons, which have to be male, but it's really going to push up, it's going to bump up conceptually to male, but he's going to let the CDF do that. That's why the CDF matters.
That's right.
Same thing with phrases like the church needs to be a democracy. Heiner Wilmer says that. They're going to turn it into a fully synodal church where other people can't undo his change. What do you say, Steve?
I think that's exactly right. And it seems to me that Wilmer is the nails in the coffin. It's kind of like the punctuation mark that Pope Francis can use to bear out the end of his patience and now it's going to spread like cancer. And it's going to spread by fiat of, well, this is just what we do now. This is just the way it is. We're coming up to date with the world. I think that's the play. And it's very subtle. That weaponized ambiguity is real and it works. And you can compare the answers to the modern dubias or the current dubia to the non-answers of the past to see the timeline of how it has grown into. I mean, they're getting very bold in their speech. And they're playing games with things like SSA couples, you can bless them. But you're not blessing SSA couples, you're blessing individuals who happen to be in SSA unions. And they're playing word games like that. They're just absurd when they've already convinced the world falsely that SSA is an ontological category rather than an artifact of disordered desire or an accidental feature of a person's choice.
Yes.
You see the bait and switch right there? So it's
Can
coming
you talk
full
about
circle.
that? The different, because I think Liftity Loftdog did a show on the blessing. Okay. Let's
the blessing.
Remember, we're going SSA for everything, or Skittles. The blessing of SS unions. Francis said he wanted to do as a Buenos Aires bishop long ago.
That's right. That's right.
30 years ago, and he did. I think it was said he said he wanted to do it, and he did. Then 3 years ago, Ladaria Feder, who was the CDF at the time, who got replaced, was like, no, you can't do that. And Francis corrected him, and he said, we're going to do that. This might have only been 2.5 years ago. And then a month and a half ago, we got that dubia responsa, it said, yes, you can bless them. So it's already done. So it doesn't really have to be talked about. A response to a dubia by the DDF, that's basically magisterial. A synod isn't. So it doesn't matter whether they talk about it anymore. But what they were saying, the false dialogue, there are two false dialogue pieces. You brought up one of them. One of them was, okay, we have to make sure that this isn't confusion for sacramental marriage. That's the bone the left was throwing.
Right.
That has nothing to do with whether or not the church can bless mortal sin. We'll just say mortal sin here.
It's such a bait and switch. Yeah.
The bait and switch. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It would be a second wrong if anyone thought this was a sacramental marriage. But that's not why it's wrong for the church to bless an SS union. Any more than can the church bless you murdering your annoying neighbor? No, that would be formal cooperation with it. That's number one.
That's
bait and switch. And I think Lofton probably defended that. But number two was the question of joint and several blessings. So they also said, and I know Lofton defended this one, it's just stupid thinking, stupid, simple-minded thought. If two Skittles salesmen who are in the same sales team, Skittles salesmen, go to their priest to bless their union, they were saying, well, it's fine that they go and get a blessing because they're being just blessed severally. So in the law, we have this concept of jointly and severally. And as long as there's not like a formality of it where they're blessed jointly at the same time, then it's okay. So it would have to be a joint and several blessing of the two Skittles men for it to be heretical or something like that. No. That's wrong. That's not how the doctrine of formal cooperation works.
Another bait and switch. Yeah.
Another bait and switch. If A goes, first man in the couple, and gets a blessing and says, can you bless me as a part of this couple? And the priest says, yes, I want to bless you as a part of this
individually, couple. I can do that.
yeah. Severally, individually, that's what they're saying they can do. And that's wrong. As if it's just like the lady in front of him in line receiving a blessing. That's not correct. It's still wrong because it's a joint blessing of it's a several blessing of the couple, even if it's not a joint blessing at the same time, the two men at the same time. Did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, but it's as you say also, it's like blessing you as a murderer or blessing you as an addict, which is also not allowed to be said these days. It's blessing you in your sin being substituted for an ontological category. This is the real problem. There's no discussion of SSA in conjunction with the blessing. There's blessing sinners. This is how we are all blessed. We are all blessed as sinners. No one in the history of the church has been blessed as a murderer or blessed as a drunk or blessed as a drug addict or blessed as a sex addict.
That's it.
An SSA addict. It doesn't. When's that happened? Just recently, only now. It's completely counterfeit because of the substitution of the accidental form for the essential form, which is the human soul, which is de facto fallen. So we are sinners, and that's how we get blessed, isn't it? As sinners.
Yes. Kind of like communion. You have to forswear to cut this out, and it's okay. Final thing, then I want to go on to Heiner Wilmer's positions, the fourth segment of tonight. But yes, this is the key element. This is why communion for the civilly divorced and remarried had to be the first agenda item accomplished on the Sankt Gallen Mafia's list of to-dos. It's because it's the key thing. Remember, if you're a divorced Catholic, can you go to communion? Yes. If you're divorced, but not remarried. Right. If you're separated from your spouse, maybe that's a sin. The church says for grave reason, you can live in different dwellings. Sure. But without grave reason, it's probably sinful to be away from your spouse. But you could basically repent for that and work on trying to make it better. The real sin that divorcees get into is they take a concubine who they're calling their second spouse, because there's no such thing as divorce. And I heard some juicy stuff on this too. And they, and I'm doing a show on it on Wednesday for that matter. And then they start having sex with this other person. Again, we'll talk about the timeline here. JP2 made it where as long as you promise not to have sex with the other person, you can keep living with them, even though it's vaguely scandalous. You know, let it be what it is. Okay, so that's why that was the first important issue, because the left, the Saint-Gallin mafia, and led by Francis, they needed to say, we're going to forgive a sin now that, unlike all of Christianity, you're asking sort of forgiveness for, but you're going to keep doing it. So you don't have the intent of reparation. So it's basically Protestantism, once saved, always saved, which is deeply heretical. It just means you don't have to reform your life at all. They did that not because they care about straight married people. That is the last thing on their minds. What's on their mind is, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me, right? Like the old song. That's what's on their mind. So if they could do it for straight divorced and remarrieds, you can kind of say, sorry, I'm such a perv, but I'm going to keep doing it. Then you can do it for this kind of union. You can bless the union. And we could say it's less than perfect. This is kind of weird. They'll still say it's sort of disordered, but you know, we can't really help it. So that's that. You guys see, if you do it with divorced and remarrieds first, it's also less shocking to a lot of people. They did it 7 years ago, and a lot of people still say Pope Francis is good without even knowing it. What do you say about that, Steve?
Oh, we're used to it. It's that frog in the slowly heating water. We become so accustomed to so many things that are so wacky that just 20 years ago would really, really shock people. They're just common, normal, everyday stuff. One of my daughters called me and said, amongst these kids are hanging out, and one of the guy's friends, who's a guy, brings his girlfriend that's not a girl. And the whole crowd's just supposed to be kind of okay with that. In my day, it was just absolutely unthinkable that a bro of mine would come and go, hey, this is my girlfriend, Ralph. You know, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So one of my daughters called me and told me that today, and I was just shocked that all those guys had to be okay with that. I mean, what would your generation do with that, Tim?
Oh yeah, with like a Dwight Howard, who it turns out likes all the Ralphinas out there. I mean, the 90s NBA, the gangsta NBA with you know, Allen Iverson writing rap songs about shooting people. They would not stand for it.
Right. And it would be a ugly situation. And now everybody's cool with it. So this slowly getting us ratchet abuse, it really makes sense, to the point we're saying, who are you to deny a blessing to an SSA? Right. And then by that point, you've missed the whole point. You've missed you've lost everything, because you lost your first principles and your roots and even your definitions. So we're in a bad way right now.
When did he say, who am I to judge? I think that was 2013 or 2014.
It was 2014, I think. Yeah. And he said, who am I to judge if they've gone to reconciliation, is what I understood. So
no, I don't think so. No, I mean, well now.
Yeah, maybe not. I took it that way, and I took the bait, and I defended that, saying, well, if someone's gone to reconciliation, has amended their ways, then after that, if they're right with God, then who am I to judge? That's not horrible, but that was right. That's not what it was, but that's what I took it as.
Yeah, no, that's
so I would. Yeah, I was wrong.
I ain't trying to. I'm just saying, I remember very specifically. You know, the media took that, ran with that. That was kind of at the beginning of this 10-year period of Pope splainers saying, oh, here comes the loony left-wing journos distorting what Pope Francis said. And then you go check, and it's like, not only is this not distorted, but it's actually worse than how they report. They could have said it accurately, way worse.
Yeah.
Now
that was my last goodwill interpretation of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this some, and that. Well, you moved away in 2014, and then the 2014 synod, it got really bad. 2015, it got really bad. 2016, in April, Amoris Laetitia came out, and it just got untenable. Let's talk now here in the fourth segment on Heiner Wilmer, who was nearly elevated to. He tried twice. There's some mysterious intervention. I couldn't find much on it. I did some digging. I contacted my friend Diane Montagna. I was going to contact Penton, but everyone's saying that it's just, you can't really find anything on it. So here's Wilmer's positions the way I've found them. I told you, he called the Eucharist overrated. He said most Catholics act as if there was nothing else. He said we need to, and by the way, these aren't one-time things, the ones that are coming. The Eucharistic stuff, that just tells you he doesn't believe, his mentor is a guy that doesn't believe Jesus rose from the dead. Very few of the German episcopate believe Jesus actually resurrected. Wow. Again, don't be shocked by that. This is what I know. And a lot of people are like, Pope Francis is good. Then I'm like, okay, what do you, let's do some baseline checks. Do you think these priests have girlfriends or boyfriends? Like, of course not. It's against the rules. I'm like, okay, all of them do. You know, I'm quoting the guys. Yeah. I studied with these guys. Would go have beer with them after class. I mean, they're just, you guys just, Americans are very naive about this, and American post-splainers are especially naive. So these are things he said, and it's just because he doesn't love Jesus, doesn't really think Jesus is God. It's very, very minority position in the German episcopate, and doesn't think the Eucharist is really Jesus, or else you couldn't call it overrated. Okay, those are one things he said. They reflect his view and his mentor's view. I forget what his mentor's name was, but what he's best known for, that he has repeated as the leader of the new leader of the German episcopate in the German synodal way within the German episcopate. He said, we need a new look at sexuality and a new way to look at the priest. So what he's talking about here is radical reform to all sex rules in the church, number one. And number two, when he says a new way to look at the priesthood, he means two things there. Women should be priests. That's part of the German synodal way. And the second thing is, and it needs to be strictly democratic. What do you have on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, and he means by democratic what modern America means by that, when all these pundits keep saying it's a threat to democracy. No, it's a threat to the globalist agenda, to the movement, to the heirs of Russia, if you will. It's just, to me, it's one and the same. And it seems so obvious, but we're so used to it. There are people that would cut this guy some slack and say, well, don't be so quick to judge. It just seems so obviously out there. I just don't know how it's not super clear, and that there wouldn't be more of an upheaval. I suspect he's not in because it's too radical, but I still don't think it will be long before that's just let go of. What do you think about that?
Oh, no,
don't let him in.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's he's not in because they found a way to work around. By the way, I need to say that from that other section. I think this is what the intervention of cardinals comprised. Them telling Pope Francis, yo, we don't need Heiner Wilmer. Get one of your other radicals, Tucho Fernandez is. Mm-hmm. You will see in the 2023 synod, remember they're saying this in the early part of the year, you will see another radical that's not as well known as Heiner Wilmer, who's very well known. He's published papers. We're going to look at a couple of them. Even slightly less radical will do. He will answer as DDF all of these planned dubia at the beginning of the fall synod, which is now in the history books, but then it wasn't. And he will say, yes, we're going to do SS unions. Yes, Amoris Laetitia meant what you thought it meant, communion for adulterers. There's no more adultery. It's basically impossible to commit adultery. Yes, he will begin work for the 24th Synod on study commissions, same way we got communion for the divorced and remarried, study commissions, which we talked about yesterday, on women deacons. And so that's proven to be the case. They did in the dubia, released September the 30th in time for the synod. It was the future to them in January of this year. Now it's past to us. They got it done anyway with Tucho Fernandez, Heal Me With Your Mouth Fernandez. So I think that was the intervention. They just said, I know Heiner Wilmer would be the most honest choice for you, Francis, because you are the chief, whatever you want to call it, Jacobin in the church.
Right.
And Francis does like to be honest occasionally, but
Mhm.
let's do a touch less, a tucho less radical, and we'll get it done anyway. And that's now a fait accompli.
Yeah, that's done. But is Wilmer out of the running for life, or do you think he'll show up in the hierarchy?
I think well, so this involves whether or not the German synodal way is Francis's synodal way, which is a very important choice. I think he will show up in the hierarchy. What do you think?
Too. I do. If I'm guessing, I don't know. I don't have any facts.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I would certainly think so.
Look, I want to say this. Here's what this tells you what Wilmer said of Francis, and again, he said this, I believe, before Francis elevated him, I believe, for number 2 in the church. Did you hear that? Before
yes.
He elevated him. The Pope wants to turn the church upside down, and therefore everyone has to let go of their own convictions. And what he means here is the deposit of faith. All these Catholics, you have to let go of what you thought it meant to be Catholic, because the Pope wants, he said of the Synod specifically, he wants to use the Synod to turn the church upside down. Remember Pope Francis said, make a mess? Yeah. That was in 2013. He wants to turn it upside down, and everyone is going to have to let go of their convictions.
Right.
What do you say about that, Steve?
That's terrifying. That's terrifying. It's PC language to get you to abandon the deposit of faith. It seems that simple, and they've incrementally prepared us all to do so with relativism, cutting us off from objective reality, objective truth, the objective good, concretizing those terms. We have our now relative good, true, and beautiful, which are nothing like the transcendentals that you encounter in the essence of God. And so we're perfectly poised to abandon our convictions, all of us, and we're being let down by our shepherds,
right,
who are willing to go along with this kind of tyranny. It's tyrannical.
It's absolutely the tyranny of relativism.
That's right. So
it was he was basically asked what the purpose of the Synod on Synodality was. Heiner Wilmer was, and I think this is before it. Wilmer declared, as a response to that, the Pope wants to turn the church upside down. Everyone has to let go of something, including their own convictions, in order to hear what the Spirit wants to say to us. Now, I believe the Spirit speaking to him. It's not the Holy Spirit.
That's the Spirit of the Lord that McCarrick referenced. Yes.
Yes, the Spirit of the Lord that McCarrick. So this is a big thing with the St. Gallen types. McCarrick was one. Heiner Wilmer is a little younger. We're going to get to that in a second. But do you see that? Tomorrow I'm doing a show on Eugenio Scalfari, who did these 11 interviews with Francis in the old European way, without taking notes or without a recording device, and then he reconstructed it. Yeah. Now Francis said Jesus was not God and there's no hell, and idiots everywhere said, well, that's fake. Francis said when Eugenio Scalfari died, we had such great conversations. That's not what you say. If someone
slandered you and misrepresented you,
you do not say that. If you want to be a banker and you're trying to be a banker and you're going through a review process, and your friend gives a public interview and says he has a tendency to steal from his workplace, then later you say, oh man, my friend gave such a great interview to you. That's a quality interview he gave to you. You'd be like, oh, I guess he's admitting that. I guess Tim is admitting he steals stuff from his workplace and he's going to steal from the bank. I have more evidence than that on Scalfari and my show tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it. That'll be good.
But the analogy, Steve, is that if Heiner Wilmer inaccurately characterized Francis's baby, his pet, the Synod on Synodality, if he had inaccurately said the Pope wants to turn the church upside down, and this was wrong, then later the Pope rewards him for it by saying, I really want to make you number 2. Well, that proves that he approves of those words.
It's a reasonable inference if you're using reason in its proper form. Tim, are you really telling me that's a quote from Wilmer that the Pope wants to turn the church upside down? That's a quote?
With the synod. That's a direct quote. The Pope asked about the synod on synodality. He responded, the Pope wants to turn the church upside down, and therefore everyone has to let go of their own convictions to hear what the Spirit's going to say to us.
How out in the open is that? This is what I'm saying.
All of it's out in the open, though. That's
it's so out in the open, and we're blind to it still. We're blind.
Yes.
And deaf.
We're blind
like,
and
don't
deaf.
be so judgy. That's really heretical and terrible.
We have young Catholics come into the church. They're like these Groiper guys that are cutting edge on all this stuff. But then if they're Catholic, and I talk to them about all sorts of things. And it's cool. Then all of a sudden the Pope comes up and they're young Catholics. They're like 20. They're new to the church. And they're like the most boomer, the least cutting edge, the most cringe, like Charlie Kirk at the Wailing Wall. That's cringe, right? You know what's also cringe? Saying, Pope Francis isn't going to give communion to the divorced and remarried. You're an idiot if you say that, because it happened 7 years ago, and they don't even know this. Or come on, you're just speculating here, bro. It's like I'm not speculating. Defenders of the synodal process that is now entering its continental phase. This is from Catholic World Report, I think. I'm reading from 2 articles. In preparation for the meeting of the Synod of Bishops in 2023, have long insisted that the recklessness of the German synodal path must not be confused with the Pope's synodal process. The Germans, concerned Catholics have been advised, are the outliers, not, the German synodal way is not Francis's synodal way, the Pope's plan. No. But this writer points out, but the German synodal path, its deconstruction of the church and its creation of a brave new Catholicism, cannot be regarded as an outlier if one of its episcopal protagonists,
becomes
a young leader, Heiner Wilmer, and defenders is named prefect of the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith, or if the Pope wanted to and got a close replacement, I would say. Sure. Under those circumstances, the German synodal path can only be considered the driver of the world synodal process.
It's just so simple. It's so obvious.
It's obvious. What do you say? It is driving the world synodal process.
Yeah, the Pope explainers will just be like, yeah, but it says right there that the Germans are an outlier. And now Tucho's doing what Tucho does, and it's the same thing. And they want Wilmer. They wanted Wilmer. It's obvious. It's just common sense is utterly destroyed in this modern world. And you get excoriated for drawing people back into their common sense. And that's too bad.
Well, that's an education thing. That's why people need to go to pay attention to you on City of Truth.
Get your kids out of the public schools.
Get your kids out of all schools. Homeschool your kids, or maybe classical Catholic academies. They're still probably going to actually learn how to reason. But yeah, people get mad when you just point this stuff out. Look, here's some other things he said.
Yeah, what else has he said?
I voted for the policy paper on, these are all direct quotes, the policy paper on the reform of Catholic sexual teaching. He means regarding Skittles candy. And I am very upset that the 2/3 majority of the bishops was not achieved. He went on to, I don't have the quote for this, but I guess the 2/3 supermajority wasn't achieved, but they did have a majority. It was more than half of the German bishops. Remember, it used to be led by Cardinal Marx. Remember that?
Remember that. Yes,
10 years ago. That he was kind of the leader of the Germans. None of them believe Jesus resurrected. All of them want the sexual teaching overhaul. And the new powerful guy is the 61-year-old Heiner Wilmer. He also said all over, up and down the page, the renewal of Catholic sexual morality is something I'm going to continue to work for. And that policy paper that he was so disappointed, Steve, that did not pass, was all about Skittles and the T in the capital T. So he also said we need a radical rethinking of ecclesiology. Let me read you that one. Go ahead and respond to any of those if you want.
But I want to just briefly look. Tell me this is not true. The maybe one of the worst culminating ends of this whole revolution with the Skittles thing is what they call MAPS, minor attracted persons.
Yeah.
You can say it's inevitably an end of a rotten fruit of this movement, and people will think you're crazy, even though in the APA, in the world, and in the church, this thing's being normalized. Tell me I'm wrong about that. So you got Vilmer here, who literally has overseen the implementation for the guidelines of gender-sensitive language in his diocese. I hope I didn't say anything wrong there, but and then disappointed that this thing didn't pass. Can you even read any of the details of this thing that didn't pass by the supermajority, or it's just obvious?
It's hard to say because we're going back and forth, both of us, between a National Catholic Register article I have up in front of me, what I know you're looking at, and then a Catholic World Report article. Both of them were pretty good. Both of them were saying, look who's about to be your new doctrinal chief. They're both about a year old. Here's one thing he directly said: the reform of the church's sex teaching is and remains a very important topic. The rejection of the policy paper by the minority bishops does not change that. I stand behind the text wholeheartedly, and I'm certain that despite the rejection, it will be widely received and discussed intensively. I assure the faithful in the Diocese of Hildesheim, where he's the bishop, that I will continue to work for a renewal of Catholic sexual morality. It is unacceptable for people to be hurt or discriminated against by church teaching. That is not the spirit of Jesus Christ. Now, that is, he said that well before Francis chose him. He also said this, Steve. I'll censor myself if I need to as I go. Okay. Should lead to, he wants to radically rethink ecclesiology. I cited that there. That's a direct quote. And what he says is, in the same interview, he also described the polemical German theologian Father Eugen Druermann as prophet of our time. Do you know anything about Druermann? From
just what I learned from the articles, that he was, what was he? Was he laicized, or was he just removed from his office?
Yeah, barred from exercising priestly faculty. So that's
because of his radical inversion of the church, right?
Yeah, I think it was his critiques of the clerical state, and had been previously questioned the virgin birth of Christ. So I told you that's very common among the Germans, cardinals and bishops in the church, the ones that gave us Francis, probably Francis himself, the virgin birth of Christ, and the physical resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That is so common. Cardinal Casper, you can go read Cardinal Casper's paper. The real brain behind the first half of this pontificate was Cardinal Casper. We're going to close with talk about him. In the same interview, Bishop Wilmer also questioned the teaching authority of the magisterium. And he said this, Steve. Again, this is why Francis wanted him. I think at times, who actually determines what is Catholic? We still act as if it were the hierarchy, because it is. Right? No, he says, as if we, the bishops, had the right to the label Catholic. That's wrong. We must be listeners, receivers, learners in conversation with Catholics, but also with Christians of other denominations and non-believers. So now we're going to spilling over into ecumenism. What do you say about that?
Look, they poisoned the entire well. It'd be hard to say something well-ordered that Wilmer puts forward, wouldn't it? Yeah. Even if we're not being as specific as we ought to, because we might get canceled.
Right. Yeah. You used to say, Pope Leo XIII said, look, a cup is poisoned if it's one drop in an otherwise large cup of pure water. So we used to joke, well, it's not like these guys, Francis and all of his perverts he's put in charge that gave him the chair, Peter. It's not like they challenge everything. They just challenge a few key things. I used to make the joke 4, 5, 6 years ago. He's still going to say there are 3 persons in the Trinity, and then everyone, all the Pope splainers cheer. They might actually challenge this. They might leave no stone unturned, is kind of the point you're making. But same thing is, so like Wilmer was nearly elevated for saying very, very specific things. We have to move past the deposit of faith. The same reason that our beloved Bishop Strickland was taken out, because he's saying we have to cleave to the deposit of faith. There's something similar with what actually happened with that specific number 2 job, the doctrinal chief job. I'm reading from this National Catholic Register article. Listen to this, Steve. I know you'll have something to say here too, because you read this too. At a meeting between the heads of Vatican curial offices and the German bishops in November 2022, Cardinal Ladaria criticized the synodal way's proposals for, quote, reducing the mystery of the church to a mere institute of power. That must be brought under the control of super controllers as soon as possible. Now, the Vatican called for a moratorium on the synodal way, get this, which the German episcopacy swiftly rejected. So Michael Lofton's out there saying because Bishop Strickland didn't implement Traditionis Custodes, that's a valid reason to take him out. Traditionis Custodes said this was a bishop's decision.
Yeah.
Traditionis Custodes went from Benedict saying all bishops have to allow the Latin Mass to saying, well, now all the lefty Skittles bishops have the freedom once again to, not allow the Latin Mass. And so it's not a violation by Bishop Strickland and the few others who left it unmolested. It's not a violation. Whereas over in Germany, Vatican officials call for a moratorium on the synodal way. And what do? They swiftly reject it. And none of them are, what if the shoe was on the other foot, right?
It's such a radically different standard for the two sides. And this abuse of power is the DNA of the church. That's ironically, invertedly true, isn't it? I mean, because it's not true at all. That's not the nature of Holy Mother Church, but it can devolve into the inversion of that by disordered men, can't it?
Yes, that's the funny thing is he's the beneficiary of the double standard, and yet he's like, he and all of the other Skittles guys, they're the beneficiaries of the double standard, not the holy, straight, rule-following bishops like Strickland, but they're the ones that are saying we need to change the hierarchy because there's a double standard. It's kind of like President Trump. I'll support him again, but it was kind of like, he's like, look, like Chappelle said, he came out of that house and he's like, I'll tell you exactly all the stuff we're doing in here. I know the rules are broken because I'm the one that invented the way to break the rules. And people say, that's kind of dope. He's actually being honest. That's what these Germans do in the church. Yeah. They're like, yeah, the hierarchy is corrupt. You know how we know? Because we corrupted it. We are the ones that run the game. So in September of 22, the 2 months before this story that I just read, Wilmer had backed each of the German synodal way's most extreme text. He called for permanent synodal council. That sounds not that bad, but what that really means is basically the Pope no longer can exercise the universal jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. He looked for women's ordination, and he'd morally condoned Skittles. And that's that policy paper he voted for later in November that he was disappointed about. Also, we have to close here, and then we'll get to St. Gallen Mafia, which will be our fifth and final point for the night. Right. The outgoing DDF prefect, the outgoing number 2 in the church, Cardinal Ladaria Ferrer, he said that Wilmer and the German synodal way believed Catholic sexual morality all must be changed and that nothing can be salvaged. And therefore, when he was doctrinal chief, Ladaria Ferrer, said, you guys have to stop this. I'm going to have to take you out. I'm going to have to do whatever. And they just thumbed their nose at him. And Francis did nothing. Oh, you know what? One thing Francis did as he was thumbing his nose at Ladaria, what did he do, Steve?
I don't know what he did.
Ladaria, you're out and you're going to be in, Wilmer, if I can.
I was hoping that wasn't it.
That's it. Yeah. Literally. And you don't tell me Bishop Strickland was removed because he thumbed his nose at the Vatican. Don't tell me that, because I don't like to be lied to, and I'm also good at, I could tell when I'm being lied to, man.
Right.
Because in his address to the German bishops gathered in Rome in late November, Cardinal Ladaria offered a calm but devastating theological critique of the German synodal path that Bishop Wilmer so frequently supports. This is from Catholic World Report now, different article, and which he is in fact an embodiment. In that address, the cardinal reminded German Catholicism that it is a part of universal church that has settled teachings on the good of human love and its expression, a church that must reject gen ideology, Gen, as incompatible with the biblical word of God, a church that is governed by bishops by the will of Christ. He's having to remind this guy that would later maybe become doctrinal chief of the fact that it's governed by the will of Christ, a church that has determined that it has no authority to admit women to holy orders, a church that reads the signs of the times, not through opinion polling. Remember, they want to do that. That's the synodal way. Among ill-catechized Catholics, but through the lens of ancient, timeless, and irreformable convictions grounded in revelation. I mean, what do you make of this, man? Like, what are we supposed to do? It's a clown world, isn't it?
It's a clown world. Yeah, I don't know how to reconcile it with it's so massively confusing. I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. I myself am in a state of confusion.
This is the only place you can be if you're an honest man. You can't say, "Oh, I know what this means." This is what I tell you, parish orphans, retrogrades. Epistemic humility. Just say, "I don't know. I do know some stuff. I know Francis is bad. I know all of the people that put him in power and that he's in turn put in power are bad. I know they're doing something bad. I know they're cooking. And I do know, don't fly off the bark. Stay on the bark, Catholics. Don't fly off the left side. None of you are on any danger of flying off the left side of the boat in this wind-tossed storm. Don't fly off the right side of the boat either. Just say, I know a few things. These are certain. I don't know anything else besides that. Listen to this. There's something surreal about an ecclesial situation in which Heiner Wilmer succeeds such fellow Germans as Joseph Ratzinger, Ludwig Moeller, as principal guardian of what John the 23rd called the sacred deposit of faith. That's really what's at issue here. Remember what Strickland said? But also because such an appointment would seem a papal repudiation, or even him flirting with it, even though he didn't eventually appoint Wilmer, Francis. Yeah. Such an appointment would seem a papal repudiation of the man, Pope Francis, previously appointed as prefect of then Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, his fellow Jesuit Cardinal, Luis Ladaria Ferrer, not Fetter. Well, why? Because they were at odds, and he said, "You're out, you're in." And all of this stuff was of very, very, very public record. Okay. Very, very public record. So that's who Heiner Wilmer is. Now, I just want to remind folks that are scratching their heads here. We have a timeline. I just want to remind you. So, Steve, you asked what the Song-Skull Mafia is. Now, I wrote the foreword for this book, Julia Maloney. It's a beautiful little book. I don't know what to say. Julia did a really good job with it, and I literally just think that you have to know the timeline. The Song-Skull Mafia began meeting in 1996. Okay. And the express goal of the Song-Skull Mafia, I'll read some of the names, was to avoid, late in the JP2 pontificate, a Ratzinger papacy. They thought Ratzinger was the arch nemesis. And as early as 96, they thought they knew who the man for the job was. They said, Cardinal Martini is like, it looks like I'm not going to be able to do the job. There's this one guy, Bergoglio, that's radical enough to do the job. Julia Maloney presents that really nicely. But I want to bring you back a couple years. I have this article. I'm looking at this news article from 1987. Where is it? It is, this UPI article. It's from 1987. The church should consider women deacons, says a Belgian cardinal. Now, I found this researching today's show from 1997. The Catholic Church should consider ordaining women as deacons, a Belgian cardinal said in a paper submitted Saturday to a global bishop synod in 1987. Remember, they had synods, and that was also in October. They always do synods in October. It's weird. And I said, I'll bet I know who this Belgian cardinal is. Do you have any guesses, Steve? Do you know who this? I
have no idea who this might be.
This, I thought, I had to read two articles further into two paragraphs further into the article to figure out, to confirm my suspicion, which I did, would be Cardinal Gottfried Daniels. Does that ring any bells, Steve?
Mm-mm.
Cardinal Gottfried Daniels is a St. Gallen Mafia alum. He is the one who told us that there was such a thing as the St. Gallen Mafia. He told us this in 2015. He's laughing. And he said, he called it the Mafia Club. And he said, yeah, we really didn't like Ratzinger. He's laughing. You can go watch this. We didn't like him. We had our little mafia group against him. And we would meet in a place called St. Gallen, Switzerland, to make sure. And then sure enough, they poked around. So Cardinal Daniels is the man, if you look at Francis waving from the loggia, that he chose to bring out there with him. I didn't know who Daniels was at the time in March of 2013. He brought him out there with him. He's known alongside Cardinal McCarrick as a kingmaker. So Daniels is a really, really bad guy. He's he's a Belgian St. Gallen Mafia member, the one that told us about the St. Gallen Mafia. There's a audio recording of him trying to convince a young boy. You can go find it somewhere. I think the young boy was either his nephew or the nephew of the man who molested him. Don't tell on him. Don't do any of this. He's like shaming him. Really, really bad guy. He tried to convince the king of Belgium to allow abortions. So he's just really bad. These guys are as bad as you could think. So he's a paid enabler, all the wrong stuff. He's the one that told us there's a mafia club. That's when I started looking into it. And he also insisted that they were doing heavy canvassing that might be illegal for Francis. At the time I learned this, Austin Ivory's book had just come out, The Great Reformer, when he said, yes, there was he didn't know it was illegal because he's an idiot, Austin Ivory. But he said, they were canvassing for Francis Bergoglio at the time before the 2013 conclave, and they asked him, and he basically said, that's cool. I'll be the man for the job. I'm your Huckleberry, whatever. He didn't know that was illegal and might invalidate the papacy before he said it. So 5 days after his book, The Great Reformer, was published, they had to pull first editions off the shelves and strike that out because Francis has to be Pope, right? He was placed here by the St. Gallen Mafia, working with Cardinal McCarrick, ambassador to China, working with the Podestas, working with the Obama administration. It was very, very important to all these people that you had Bergoglio. Oh, yes, the Podestas were in on this. So in this 1987 article, they say we need to have women deacons. And that's how I knew, not because I'm Nostradamus, who the Belgian was. I said, oh, this has got to be Gottfried Daniels, one of the St. Gallen Mafia guys. Okay. So I want to have everyone, we're about to close here, but I want everyone to recall the one good German cardinal, Cardinal Walter Brandmüller. He is one of the 4 dubia cardinal. Remember, 2 of those dubia. Do you remember, Steve, who the 4 dubia cardinal are?
I don't.
So 2 of them are dead.
Right.
One is Cardinal Carlo Cafara, an Italian, who died waiting for Francis to answer, are you saying adulterers can have sex with their concubines? After Amoris Laetitia came out. He died. Joachim Meisner. Oh, it was also a German. Another good German. Dubia cardinal. He was there with Cardinal Brandmüller. Signed the dubia. That's the second one. They both died waiting for their father to respond to them faithfully. The 2 surviving ones are Cardinal Burke and Cardinal Brandmüller. Now, Brandmüller's say the only good guy in the German cardinalate. In 2014, before, I believe, it was in the fall, but I believe it was before the family synod in October, he said, here's what's going to happen in the Francis pontificate. Okay, 2014. These things are going to happen in this order. First, because I'm in the German cardinalate and episcopate, I know they're the guys that pull Francis's strings. He was put here to do communion for the divorced and civilly remarried for adulterers. Check. Got that done April 2016, right? Then women deacons. That's being done right now. It's being done right now. They're steady commissioning it, the same as they steady commissioned communion for the divorced and remarried in 2014, 2015. Then, now he said, viri probati, married priests in the Latin rite. I don't think that's not such a big deal compared to this other stuff, right?
That's right.
Some of the rites,
Right.
some of the rites have it.
Yeah.
That's a discipline. That seems not to have been discussed at all. Maybe he was wrong on that. Instead, substitute for that third item, SS unions and blessing.
And the godparents and trans T.
Yes. Skittles in general. So that seems to have replaced the third item. And then the fourth item, intercommunion with the Lutherans, which is why it's so important to get someone like Wilmer, who has essentially a Lutheran view of the Eucharist, which he did, and basically all these guys do. So they're catching. Remember how McCarrick said, he'll get us back over target, get us back on schedule. He didn't mean us, the church. There's no schedule to keep. It meant the radicals. Francis will be able to do it in 5 years. Martini said he would only take 5 or 6 years to do it. Well, it's taken 10 now, and they're going to accomplish 2 of these things now. But Brandmuller called it because, remember, he's going to these Episcopal German meetings with all these guys, and he's hearing probably not their finer tuned plans, but he's hearing what they're really going to want to do. But so this is a 1987 article. You can go read it on UBI. It's called Cardinal: Church Should Consider Women Deacons, saying women deacons. Does that surprise you, Steve, that this has been a plan all along?
I mean, it shouldn't. If I'm yeah, it shouldn't surprise me, but it does. And I'm disappointed to say it. I really don't have my ear to the ground on all these things, and it does surprise me continually that these things are coming up like this. It's terribly concerning.
Yeah, so if this one surprised me. In 1972 was the first recorded paper on the other big issue, which is now a fait accompli: communion for the divorced and civilly remarried.
72, huh?
72. Wow. You know who wrote that paper?
No.
Ratzinger.
Oh.
So yeah, we have all these fake conservatives in the church. I don't know about his thing, but so kind of went away during the 70s. We need to get communion for the divorced and remarried. Kind of went away during the 80s. In 1991, I want to fast forward from 1987. I want to fast forward to 1991. JP2 publishes Familiaris Consortio. I think it's paragraph 26. He says he makes this exception: if you're divorced from your husband, your true husband, civilly, and you're remarried and you had an illegitimate child, I'll let you keep living with your concubine. You just have to live Josephite as brother and sister.
Right.
Problem solved. Okay, so there's no need to worry about. You can come back to communion if you are living Josephite. You can't be having sex with someone besides your spouse, because that's timeless teaching. So that's published in 91. 2 years later, in 1993, another Sankt Gallen mafioso, Cardinal Walter Casper, still alive, who's one of the main guys, the brain trust in Francis's pontificate right now, starts publishing papers in 1993, 2 years after the problem's solved. I talked about this yesterday. Yeah, that's fine. JP2 made it where maybe remarried divorcees can have the problem worked out. They can go to communion, but they can't have sex. We need the adulterous sex okayed. So in 1993, he starts working on this. Okay, 1996, jump forward 3 more years. I'm giving everyone a sense for it. This is when the Gallen Mafia allegedly first got together, according to Cardinal Daniels, who had that 87 article, 1987. 96, they say we can't have Ratzinger because he's going to shut down these 3, 4, 5 agenda items. We can't have that. So there's one guy that'll do this all for us, right? And they're publishing this in real time. And we're going to meet once a year at Sankt Gallen, Switzerland. By the way, James Grine said McCarrick was attending these meetings. James Grine, who was molested by McCarrick, and he would bring him with him to Sankt Gallen, Switzerland. Wow. So 1996 to 2005 or 2004 at the conclave, which gave us Benedict. Yeah, was it 2005? Yeah, it was 2005. So they met for about 10 years. And they say, look, at all of these things, 1991, we have Familiaris Consortio, JP2 and his CDF Ratzinger, who's probably going to be the next pope, they're going to shut us down. They're going to say no adulterous sex, which is going to lead to no Skittles type sex, which is going to lead to no female deacons. These are the big items. We want all these. There's only one guy that'll do it. It's this Argentine. This is what they say. They identify very early on. And so there are calls in this time between 2005, then they lose. At the 2005 conclave, they nearly got Bergoglio into office. He kept coming second in all of the scrutinies at that conclave. We talked about this yesterday.
Yes.
No one knew who he was, but he was coming in second because all the St. Gallen Mafia people, a lot of them, if you include the grunts, were voting for him. Well, so they have this lunchtime meeting where Martini and Ratzinger or Silvestrini and Ratzinger are seen walking arm in arm. After lunch, fourth scrutiny, all the St. Gallen Mafia votes go for Ratzinger, who becomes Pope Benedict. And immediately after that 2005 coronation of Benedict, the St. Gallen Mafia guys are giving 2006, 7, 8, they're giving interviews around the world saying this is going to be a short pontificate. Wait and see. Wait and see. Wait and see what happens. All of them are giving these interviews.
Yeah.
Wait and see what happens. So it'll be a short pontificate. 2013, because they knew that there had been a deal likely arranged, I guess, between Ratzinger and those guys. Yeah, I'll step down, which he did in 2013.
There's no concrete proof of that, is there?
No, that's not.
It's
true.
just speculation and inference. Okay.
Well, it's more inference than speculation, but yeah, some speculation. I mean, it's just the only way to make sense of these facts. But yeah, that one's not proved, but the arm in arm walking when these two guys hated each other was very strange. And then immediately all the votes go. 2000, and they knew the St. Gallen Mafia as a fact said, this is going to be a short pontificate. We know. How do you know? Well, they knew it needed to be because Bergoglio was not that much younger than Ratzinger. I mean, yeah, he's technically a different generation, but he's only like 10 years younger.
10 years younger, yeah.
Yeah. So 2013, you get Francis. He comes out onto the loggia with Gottfried de Niels. And then later in 2013, you have McCarrick, who's the American emeritus St. Gallen mafioso, telling that story that I played earlier, and I played it yesterday. And he says, look, I arranged this. This mysterious Italian gentleman whom my friend Stephen O'Reilly, I think, has triangulated who the mysterious Italian gentleman is.
I just don't even want to know.
He's very interesting. Go to Roma Locuta Est, Stephen Riley's blog. Great. Go to the Synod Chronicles, or the Conclave Chronicles. Great stuff. Stephen O'Reilly, he's been on the show. He's on the show last week. So McCarrick says, yeah, we knew, we arranged it. de Niels was basically saying we arranged it. Francis's friend and biographer, Austin Ivory, says, yeah, it was all arranged. It was canvassed. This was bought and paid for. The fourth secret of Fatima author, Antonio Sochi, wrote this book, The Secret of Benedict, said that the Podestas and Obama's all in on this. WEF's likely in on it. Francis is very, very important. Like, what's his face said today, Javier Milei, or like I played Javier Milei saying to Tucker today, he's more politically interested than the church, right? So Francis is very, very important to the world scheme of power. Then you have 2014, 15, 16. 14 is the Extraordinary Synod. The Africans are like, this is crazy. In October, they're like, they're planning revolution. The Relatio, the midterm report, comes out at the 2014 Synod, and it says we have to examine the positive dimensions of Skittles relations. Remember that? Everyone went crazy.
Right.
The 2015 Synod looms in October 2015. In June of 2015, Cardinal Casper, the man with the Casper plan to give communion to divorced and civilly remarried, goes on Raymond Arroyo's show. And remember what he said? I played this about 2 weeks ago on my show. I played that interview. He said, we're doing the same thing we did at the council with the council documents. We wrote it a certain way and it'll be interpreted another way. It'll be a plausible way, but that's what they're doing. And then he's like, Francis originally was going to go with my plan, give communion to the divorced and remarried, but I'm out. I've fallen out of favor. He's probably not going to do it now. And Arroyo was like, but you were guaranteeing he would. He was play acting. He said he wouldn't. That was June 2015. October 2015 rolls around. At that synod, the rules are being changed every day, like shadow council in 1964, 65 at Vatican II. The rules are being changed every day. Even some of the liberal synod fathers complained about it. The synod ends. They publish less of the documents the way they did last month. Francis learned you got to play in the shadows. We're just waiting between October of 2015 and April 2016, waiting for 6 months, Steve. Longest time ever for Amoris Laetitia, even though it was probably pre-written. It's the longest papal document ever produced by the Roman Catholic Church. Did you know that? It's got all these chapters with nonsense in it. Only chapter 8 mattered. Only chapter 8 was what they talked about at the 2014 and 2015 synods, and they didn't come out and say communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. He did, but he didn't. He stuck it in a footnote. It was 6 months after April, 5 months after April, September of that year, 2016, that the Argentine bishops, which is how Javier Milei knows so much about what's going on with Francis, the Argentine bishops publish a dubia to Francis. The Dubia brothers' dubia were never answered. 2 of them die waiting for 7 years, but theirs is answered instantly. This is our interpretation of Amoris Laetitia. It means go ahead and give communion to adulterers. And he said,
you've interpreted it well, yes.
That you have the only correct interpretation. He stuck it in the AAS.
Right.
7 years later, starting this synod, he answered another dubia about it, doubled down. This is his new DDF now answering it, saying, yes, that was a correct interpretation of the interpretation. This is the St. Gallen Mafia, man. This is it. These are my notes. This is the mafioso Pope. And that's why Strickland is gone. This is the long answer to our show yesterday. Well, I'll let you have the last word, Steve. I'm talked out.
No, I'm incredulous. I came in not knowing a lot about this because I don't have my ear to the ground, like I said, and it just seems surreal to me that the Holy Mother Church that I came into in 2008 has made such a radical shift that maybe isn't as radical as I think, because I didn't see the undercurrents, the incrementalism leading up to this. You know, I immersed myself in the church doctors and the tradition, and so I have to admit that I'm even surprised by some things today. But it's good to discuss these things. It's good to get them out there, put them out, see the light of day, because that's the thing that's going to vanquish the lies.
Well, you're not wrong though, Steve. You're right. Okay, that's what you do. Read the church fathers. See, I don't have this like Benedict option, bury your head in the sand thing. I'm not a Pope splainer. I cover the stuff, but I don't go to. I'm not a sedevacantist. I don't go to SSPX chapels. Even I'm not weighing in. I'm not saying that stuff is. I'm not weighing in on it. I'm not condemning it. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying, I cover this stuff. I cover Pope Francis because no one else does. Almost no one else does. And as much as he complains like he's the victim, not that many even faithful Catholics cover him these days. Everyone got tired of doing it. So I have to keep going. I have to keep repeating some of the information. But I agree with you. Don't be a Pope splainer. I'd say you have it perfect. Read the church fathers, read Aquinas, read, the
Augustine, my patron saint.
Yeah. Augustine, read your Augustine. He makes some Neoplatonic errors, but definitely read.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, no, read Augustine. Read,
of course.
Read
Bonaventure. Read John of Damascus. Of course.
Read John of Damascus. Read everything.
Yeah.
But and never declare that Vatican II is fake or whatever. But yeah, you're not required to read Vatican II documents or female doctors of the church. I know a lot of people like them, but anything that follows Vatican II, closed in 1965, but really only began getting implemented in 1970. That's where you see all the changes occurs. 1970. Maybe just don't read that as much. Don't go around denying it, but don't read it. I'm not denying Francis is Pope, but I only read his stuff with a skeptical eye. And maybe he's not Pope. That would be far cleaner. But you see, I think you have the right attitude, because you're not denying this stuff's a fact. You're just saying the church is still the church, man. Even if he's not the Pope,
church. Yeah.
Whether he's Pope or not Pope, the church is still the church.
That's right. That's right. My big recommendation to anybody is to recognize what the world's doing today to commit this war on our family outside the church. World governments, globalism is trying to ruin our families. They need to destroy the family. So as families, as parents, we have to protect our children. And that might begin with the recovery of an authentic education to not allow our children to be brainwashed and gaslit by the public, by the modern media. It's really a train wreck out there. So confusion reigns right now. And we can do nothing better than to protect our families and to ground ourselves in the sacramental life, the liturgical life. Turn to the Eucharist, the source and summit of our faith, as it even says in Vatican II, contrary to Vilmer.
Even Vatican II admits that. They probably hated it, most of the guys writing it, but the documents even call it the source and summit. They had to hate it. Yeah, Wilmer says it's overrated. The guy Francis really wanted for doctrinal chief people said that the Eucharist is overrated and Catholics act as if there's nothing else. These are the asshats that are running the church now. It doesn't mean the church ain't the church, though. It just doesn't. And people don't get how I have this position. The church is still the church. These guys.
That's right. And let me say this. One of the things that we're really drawn into with all the relativism shoved at us is that our judgment is completely off. It's turned into rationalization. So we are likely to judge the church by the fallen men in it. And that's a huge mistake. Like you were saying, read the fathers. The only men you can use to judge the church are the saints, because they lived out the dogma and the doctrine as best they could, cooperating with nature and the grace of God to be perfected. So that's the model. It's horrendous when we're convinced that we need to take bad men, even excommunicated Catholics, and judge the church by them. That's a huge error.
That's a great point. Judge the church by the saints. Don't judge them by the fallen prelates. Remember, Mary said at Our Lady of Good Success that they would, many in the 20th century, starting in the middle of the 20th century, many of the bishops would be sexually corrupted. That's happened. So they're not the standard. They're the fallen. I mean, that's happened before. Peter Damian talks about it in his day. Now it's way worse than it's ever been. There's nothing close. This is why we've never had a pope like Francis. So I'm not saying that. And there is the only pushback. It's not pushback, but the only thing I would say is you ought to be able to use theoretically the vicar of Christ as an exemplar. You ought to be able to use your bishop, but it's not a requisite. There are popes likely in hell. We've had really bad guys. A pope rape and sire a kid in the Vatican. We've had, now that influenced us less. That was more kind of like he's risking his own soul. Pope Francis is the one that's really trying to quote cite his own would-be CDF chief, turn the church upside down with synodality, and that's what he's doing. And that's what will happen if we get girl deacons. I mean, that'll be the worst thing. That'll be as bad as communion for divorced and civilly remarried. But but the point is, yeah, of course, go receive communion. But I really want to underscore, people, there are 4 pillars of this channel, right? They're patriarchy. Men don't lead their families. In spite of their wives are bossing them around. You guys out there, stop that. The Pope can't make your wife boss you around, even if the Pope makes women deacons. I mean, he's a feminist. Who cares? Take charge of your own family. That's number one, patriarchy. What does patriarchy require? Subsidiarity. We need to live in small communities of like-minded people. Don't live around people that are different from you, especially ideologically or morally or religiously. Be around people that are like you. That's how, that's how you foster patriarchy. Families living amongst each other. Education is the 3rd pillar of this channel, and right-wing community organizing. But I want to close with this notion about education. You go to City of Truth. Check out Steve's stuff. Check out Retrograde Classical Academy. But really, Steve has been a teacher long. I was a teacher for about 10 years, right? 8 years as a high school teacher, 2 years as a college teacher. And that's good. But Steve's been a teacher for like 3 decades. And he's like the Catholic education guru on classical stuff, how to homeschool your kid. We have to put out some more material together on this, Steve. But
yeah, we do.
I'm all talked out. There's two-hour shows. I never do 2 hours.
I know. We shouldn't be doing this. Is crazy. But I didn't make a nod to Our Lady, the mediatrix of all graces. I have a devotion, a daily rosary. These are things that we have to do in the liturgical life and the sacramental life. For the man to be the patriarch, the right kind of patriarch, and to draw the family together, protect them, educate them. Subsidiarity. Did you post that thing on subsidiarity where someone inverted the order? He said, gravity is the earth moving up beneath your feet. I mean, it's just absurd what you posted. You want to say what that is real quick? Because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was, well, everyone knows who's on Twitter knows the infamously idiotic tweets of Tony Annette. I mean, this guy's a joker. But it's a clown world, so he does okay. And how many followers does he have?
Yeah. Subsidiarity is when the government does everything for you. You know,
his tweet was actually, okay, I'm seeing, he's going to correct it for you. I'm seeing a number of comments about subsidiarity. This is so often misinterpreted. Subsidiarity is about high-level institutions helping low-level institutions achieve their ends. This can entail the provision of material support. And Bug Hall, nice guy, Bug Hall, reacted to him. I just wrote, ha, 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 ha. Then I did, gravity is so often misinterpreted. Gravity is actually about the earth rising to meet your feet every time you jump. And then I said, I fixed it for you. Here's Pius XI. It's a fundamental principle of philosophy, fixed and unchangeable, that one should not withdraw from individuals and commit to the community what they can accomplish by their own enterprise and industry. The exact opposite of what Annette said. So too, it is an injustice and at the same time a grave evil. This means it's a mortal sin.
That's right.
A grave evil to undo subsidiarity and a disturbance of right order, to transfer to the larger and higher collectivity functions which can be performed and provided for by lesser subordinate bodies. He got it totally wrong. So leftists are
totally inverted it, like everything else in clown world. So can I make a shameless pitch here? My whole thesis, what took me decades to learn, is that modern public education is nearly a global phenomenon. It's a monolithic, systematic denial of reality, of nature, of God, of truth, and the objective moral standard. It truly is. It's vile. And its major methods that are unseen in the classroom today are brainwashing, gaslighting, and virtue signaling. These are dreadful situations, and we've been slowly, incrementally getting used to it. We need to take our kids out of the public schools and recover what is so unbelievably simple. And that's what I'm working on at City of Truth. But I did a talk 2-3 weeks ago in the UK, in London, with the Family Life International conference run by Greg Clovis, an amazing man, and his family, Augie, beautiful family. And I gave a talk called War on the Family. I just got done recording it, and I'm going to have a public presentation of War on the Family. This is public education's role in destroying the family. Just a few really important things. It's a 45-minute talk. So I'm going to invite people to come watch the talk, and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So I hope you can join me. Go to cityoftruth.co and figure out how to sign up.
What's the date of that talk?
I haven't set a date yet. I'm going to Atlanta tomorrow for Thanksgiving, and then when I get back, I'll set a date for it. Should be in the next week or two. Cool. Maybe I'll come back and let you know when it is.
Any other shameless plugs? We support them big time.
That's about as shameless as it gets. I just launched my YouTube channel and my Twitter, which and something else, the locals. So I'm doing all kinds of stuff. I have the website. I have a free newsletter. If you sign up, I'm answering questions. Families are writing in and asking questions about homeschooling. I'm giving rather difficult answers, but it's worth contemplating and recovering an authentic education for yourself, which necessarily is a liberal arts education in order to delve into philosophy and theology.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Fair Servants, Retrogrades, thank you guys for watching 2 long shows in a row. I'm pleased to, Steve's been on the show before, but this was a proper introduction because now you've heard his great takes for 2 hours times 2 days in a row. Tomorrow I will be back doing this will be 4 shows 4 days in a row because I'm going to chill over Thanksgiving. Tomorrow will be Eugenio Scalfari, the infamous but never talked about interviews he granted to Pope Francis, where Pope Francis, in the old European style, told him hell's not real and Jesus was not God while he's man. The Vatican said something about this, not quite a denial. I'll read to you what they said, and I'll explain to you why the Pope-splainers lied about, well, you don't know why, but how they lied about the nature of this denial by the Vatican, and also what Francis said at his funeral. I talked about it some today, but it's a very fascinating turn of events. Also, Francis gave 11, by my count, might be 10, 11 interviews to Eugenio Scalfari. I used to ride the metro in Rome to school, and they would be handing out free, because it's Marxist. Eugenio Scalfari founded and was the chief editor till he was 98 years old. He dedicated his whole life to La Repubblica, and they would hand it to me. They'd try to hand it to me, and I'd always tell them, get that out of my face, man. Get that Marxist.
Like Nacho Libre. Yeah.
Yeah. Get that corn out of my face. Good reference. God bless you, Steve. I love you.
God bless you, Tim, and family.
Yeah, and you and Faith and the girls as well. Steve's wife, Faith, was one of the great presenters at STEPH'S Ain't No Such Thing as Halfway Cooks conference. We're going to have some more women's conferences with Rachel Wilson and maybe Pearly things and some other great, we had great, and Lauren Demler. We had some great women presenters, and Samantha Bice. Man, that was such a great conference. I love that.
That was fun.
You and Faith are some of our coolest friends, and we miss you, man. I wish we were spending
likewise, and we miss you guys. Yeah, we're gonna get together soon. You guys are coming out to Santa Barbara.
We'll do it soon, man. I don't want to come back to the S and Gomorrah.
It's a safe haven here, a little house here, tiny place. You'll love it. You will love it for 5 days.
All right. Well, God bless everyone. Back tomorrow with Eugenio Scalfari and Francis. Don't believe the hype. The Scalfari thing is real. God bless you guys.
God bless you all.
Des Volt.